In 1934, a woman named Edna Colvin in Muskogee, Oklahoma, fed a family of 7 on less than $4 a week. She had flour, lard, and whatever she could grow in the side yard. Her youngest daughter said she never once heard her mother complain. Number 12 on this list cost less than 8 cents. Number 7 was what families made when someone got sick. Number 1 kept people alive across the entire South for over 100 years. These are not trendy budget hacks. They used 3 ingredients or fewer. No fancy techniques, no expensive cuts, just survival, memory, and a kind of cooking most of America has forgotten. If this is your first time here, subscribe now, because we cover the foods and traditions that shaped this country. Here are 25 cheap 3-ingredient meals American seniors made when money was tight. Number 25, potato soup. In the winter of 1931, a coal miner's wife in Harlan County, Kentucky, made this every single night for 2 months straight. 3 potatoes, 1 onion, a splash of milk if she had it. That was the whole recipe. She boiled the potatoes until they fell apart, mashed half of them into the water to thicken the broth, and left the rest in chunks. A little salt, a little pepper. A 10-pound sack of potatoes cost about 23 cents in 1931. That sack could make soup for 2 weeks. In mining towns across Kentucky and West Virginia, potato soup was not a choice. It was what there was. The mines had shut down. The company stores had closed their credit lines. Potato soup did not pretend to be something it was not. It was warmth in a bowl when there was nothing else. Number 24, cornmeal mush. If your grandmother grew up poor, she probably called this breakfast. In homes across Appalachia, the Ozarks, and the Deep South, cornmeal mush was the first thing a child learned to eat and the last thing a widow gave up. Cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt. Families stirred it on the stove until it thickened and ate it hot with whatever they had. Molasses, a pat of butter, bacon drippings. If there were leftovers, the mush went into a loaf pan, let it set overnight, sliced it in the morning, and fried it in lard until the edges went crisp and golden. In 1936, cornmeal cost about 15 cents for a 5-pound bag. That bag could feed a family for a week. Clara Canucciari, who later became famous for her depression cooking videos at age 93, remembered eating this as a girl in Chicago. She said nobody thought about what they were missing. They were just glad to have something hot. Number 23, sugar bread. This was dessert in homes where dessert did not exist. A slice of bread, a smear of butter or lard, a spoonful of sugar on top. That was it. Children in textile mill towns across the Carolinas ate this after supper and thought it was a treat. Mothers in the Dust Bowl handed it to their kids and called it cake. In families where even butter was a luxury, they used bacon grease instead and still sprinkled the sugar. Sugar was about 6 cents a pound in 1933. A woman in Gastonia, North Carolina, remembered her mother making sugar bread every Friday night during the Depression. She said it felt like a celebration even though there was nothing to celebrate. That small sweetness at the end of a hard day mattered more than it should have. Number 22, pinto beans and cornbread. If you grew up in the mountains of West Virginia, you already know this one. Church ladies made it every Wednesday for decades. A pot of dry pinto beans, a ham bone saved from Sunday, a skillet of cornbread made from cornmeal, water, and a little grease. The beans simmered all day on a wood stove, and by evening they were thick and rich and tasted like they had 10 ingredients instead of 2. A pound of dry pintos cost around 9 cents in 1938. The ham bone was free because nobody else wanted it. You crumbled the cornbread into the beans and ate it with a spoon. Families in eastern Kentucky, southwest Virginia, and all through the hollows of Appalachia ate this combination 3 or 4 nights a week. It was not a side dish, it was the whole meal. And for a lot of people, it was enough. Number 21, fried bologna sandwich. A boy named Raymond Perez in San Antonio remembered his mother buying a whole ring of bologna in 1952 for 35 cents. She sliced it thick, fried it in a skillet until the edges curled up and turned brown, and put it on white bread with a little mustard. That was lunch for him and his 3 brothers every day for an entire summer. Bologna was the cheapest processed meat in the grocery store. A 1-pound ring could make 4 sandwiches. When fried, the fat rendered out and the edges crisped up, and the whole thing tasted like something far more expensive than 35 cents. Across the South and the industrial Midwest, fried bologna was a constant in working-class kitchens through the 1950s and 1960s. For families who could not afford ham or roast beef, fried bologna was not a compromise. It was a meal they actually looked forward to. Number 20. Egg drop soup. In 1943, a Japanese-American woman named Setsuko Hayashi in Stockton, California, made this for her children with nothing but water, eggs, and soy sauce. She had been released from an internment camp 6 months earlier and had almost nothing in her kitchen. She heated the water, whisked the eggs, and poured them slowly into the pot so they formed thin ribbons. A splash of soy sauce. That was dinner. It took 5 minutes. 2 eggs cost about 2 cents in the early 1940s. Egg drop soup had existed in Chinese cooking for centuries. But during the war years, American families of all backgrounds discovered that eggs and a pot of boiling water could feel like a real meal. It was not filling in the way a stew was filling. Still, it was protein, it was hot, and it kept you going until morning. Number 19. Milk toast. If you ever got sick as a child, your grandmother may have made this when somebody was old or when there was almost nothing left in the kitchen. Stale bread or toast, warm milk poured over the top, a little sugar or a pinch of salt, depending on the family. In the 1940s, whenever a child stayed home from school with a fever, this was what appeared on the bedside table. It was soft enough for toddlers and gentle enough for elderly people who had lost their teeth. Milk toast showed up in American kitchens as far back as the 1800s, and by the Depression, it had become the unofficial meal of last resort. It cost a few pennies. It required no cooking skill whatsoever, and it carried a strange kind of comfort that had nothing to do with flavor and everything to do with being taken care of. Number 18. Dandelion greens with bacon grease. After a long winter of potatoes, dried beans, and salt pork, the first dandelion greens in the yard were treated like a gift from the ground itself. Mabel Combs in Letcher County, Kentucky, sent her children out every April with paper sacks to pick the young leaves before they turned bitter. She piled them in a bowl, poured hot bacon grease straight from the morning skillet over the top, and added a splash of vinegar. That was the whole recipe: greens that cost nothing, fat from the morning bacon, a sharp bite from whatever was in the pantry. In Appalachia and across Pennsylvania Dutch country, families had been eating dandelion greens this way for generations. Old-timers called them a spring tonic. They believed the bitterness cleaned the blood after months of heavy winter food. Whether that was true or not, the craving was real. Dandelion greens grew in every yard, every ditch, every cracked sidewalk in every town in America. A woman in Scranton, Pennsylvania, told her daughter that picking dandelions was the first chore she ever gave her children. She wanted them to understand that food did not always come from a store. Sometimes it came from the ground right under their feet. That lesson does not expire. Number 17. Rice and gravy. In South Louisiana, this was not a side dish. It was the center of the plate. White rice, a dark roux made from flour and fat. Whatever leftover drippings or scraps of meat could be worked into the gravy. Cajun and Creole families stretched a single chicken across 3 or 4 meals this way. The bones went into stock, the drippings went into gravy, the rice soaked it all up. In 1947, a 25-pound bag of rice cost about $1.50 in Lake Charles. That bag lasted a month. A widow in Abbeville, Louisiana, later told her granddaughter that she ate rice and gravy for dinner every night for 2 years after her husband died. She said it was not sad. It was just the way things were. Number 16. Mayonnaise sandwich. 2 slices of white bread, a thick spread of mayonnaise, nothing else. In the 1930s and 1940s, this was lunch in thousands of American homes where there was no meat, no cheese, and no leftovers. A jar of mayonnaise cost about 15 cents and lasted 2 weeks. It gave plain bread a richness that butter could not match. Children grew up eating mayonnaise sandwiches without realizing they were eating a poverty meal. To them, it was just lunch. A man who grew up in rural Alabama in the 1940s said he ate a mayonnaise sandwich every day of second grade. He did not think of it as going without. He thought of it as what everybody ate. It sounds like almost nothing. For a generation that measured a meal by whether it stopped the hunger, it was enough. Number 15. Hot water cornbread. Cornmeal. Boiling water. A little salt. Women mixed it into a thick paste, shaped it into small patties with their hands, and dropped them into a skillet of hot grease. They fried up golden on the outside and dense and warm on the inside. In the rural South, hot water cornbread was the bread of people who could not afford flour for biscuits. A 5-pound bag of cornmeal cost 15 cents in 1935, and it made dozens of patties. There was no egg, no milk, no baking powder, just corn and water and heat. The technique went back to Native American cooking. Cornmeal and water, shaped by hand, cooked over fire. Settlers learned it and passed it down, and by the time the Depression hit, hot water cornbread was second nature in homes across Alabama, Mississippi, Georgia, and the Carolinas. Women made it 3 or 4 times a week, sometimes as a side, sometimes as the whole meal with a bowl of beans or a glass of buttermilk. It was as old as the country itself, and it fed more Americans than most people will ever know. Number 14. Bread pudding. Stale bread, milk, sugar. That was the foundation. The bread got torn into pieces, soaked in the milk and sugar, maybe cracked an egg in if there was one, and baked until it puffed up and turned golden. In New Orleans, bread pudding eventually became a restaurant dessert with whiskey sauce and powdered sugar. In the kitchens where it started, it was a promise that nothing would go to waste. A loaf that had gone hard was not trash. It was tomorrow's dessert. In 1932, a boarding house cook in Memphis named Hazel Turner made bread pudding every Friday with the week's leftover bread. She served it to 12 boarders and charged 2 cents a slice. She later said the secret was not the recipe. It was knowing that people who are hungry do not care if the bread is fresh. That philosophy ran through every kitchen in Depression-era America. A stale heel of bread that a modern family would toss in the garbage was the beginning of something worth eating. Waste was the real enemy, not poverty itself. Bread pudding was proof of that. Number 13. Navy bean soup. A pound of dried navy beans, a ham bone, water. It simmered on the stove for hours until the beans broke down into a thick, creamy broth. The ham bone gave it salt and richness without costing a cent. Butchers gave ham bones away because nobody wanted them. During the Depression, women in factory towns across Ohio and Pennsylvania kept a pot of navy bean soup going on the back burner for days, adding water when it got too thick. The United States Senate has served navy bean soup in its dining room every single day since 1903. The version that mattered was the one made in a dented pot on a coal stove by a woman who could not afford a second course. A pound of navy beans cost 8 cents in 1935. For that, you fed a family of 6. That math kept people alive. Number 12. Buttered egg noodles. Egg noodles. Butter. Salt. That is the whole recipe. You boiled the noodles, drained them, dropped in a lump of butter, and tossed it all together. In the 1950s, mothers who had nothing else in the pantry put this on the table and watched their children eat it like it was the best thing they had ever tasted. A bag of egg noodles cost about 20 cents. A stick of butter cost around 15 cents. For 35 cents total, you could feed 3 or 4 people. It was not exciting. It was not pretty. It was warm and filling, and it took less than 10 minutes. Children who grew up on buttered noodles did not know their families were struggling. They just knew they liked dinner. Years later, when those same children had money and options, many of them still made buttered egg noodles on the nights when nothing else felt right. Number 11. Tomato sandwich. White bread. A thick slice of ripe tomato. A little salt and pepper. In the South, this was a summer ritual. Families waited all year for the tomatoes to come in, and when they did, you did not waste them on a complicated recipe. You sliced them, put them on bread, salted them, and ate them standing at the kitchen counter. A tomato from the garden cost nothing. The bread cost pennies. In 1948, the average American household grew at least some of its own food. In rural communities, a good tomato was treated with the same respect you would give a piece of meat. The sandwich was simple enough that a child could make it. It tasted like summer itself. For families who had spent the winter on canned vegetables and dried beans, that first tomato sandwich was proof that better days were coming. Number 10. Biscuits and gravy. Flour, lard, and buttermilk for the biscuits. Sausage drippings, flour, and milk for the gravy. This was breakfast across the American South and Midwest for over a century. But when money got tight, the sausage disappeared, and what you had left was a flour gravy made from drippings and milk, poured over biscuits that cost almost nothing to make. In Appalachian homes, they called this sawmill gravy because that was what the men in the lumber camps ate before dawn. A batch of biscuits cost about 7 cents in 1939. The gravy cost even less because it was made from scraps that most people would have thrown away. A woman in rural Tennessee once said that biscuits and gravy was not a recipe. It was a promise. A promise that no matter how bad things got, there would be something hot on the table in the morning. Number 9. Fried egg sandwich. Bread, an egg, a little butter or bacon grease in the skillet. That was it. In 1934, eggs cost about 12 cents a dozen. For a penny an egg, a fried egg sandwich could fill you up for hours. Some people called it a one-eyed Sam when they cut a hole in the bread and fried the egg right inside it. Others just fried the egg flat and folded the bread around it. In factory towns across the Rust Belt, men carried fried egg sandwiches wrapped in wax paper to their shifts because they were cheap, fast, and did not need to be kept cold. A man named Walter Jablonski in Gary, Indiana, ate a fried egg sandwich for lunch every workday for 22 years at the steel mill. His daughter said he never once asked for anything different. It was not that he did not want more, it was that the sandwich was honest and it did the job. That was enough. Number 8. Wacky cake. Flour, sugar, and cocoa powder. No eggs, no milk, no butter. The dry ingredients went right in the baking pan. 3 small wells got pressed into the mixture. Vinegar in one, vanilla in another, vegetable oil in the third. Then water over the whole thing, stirred together, and into the oven. That was it. If you have never made a cake without eggs or butter, you would not believe this works. It does. The vinegar and baking soda react to make the batter rise, and the result is a moist chocolate cake that tastes nothing like sacrifice. During World War II, when eggs and butter were rationed, wacky cake became the answer for families who still wanted something sweet. It spread through church cookbooks and handwritten recipe cards from coast to coast. A woman named Dorothy Elkins in Wheeling, West Virginia, copied the recipe onto an index card in 1943 and made it every Saturday for the next 30 years. Her granddaughter still has that card. The ink is faded, but the recipe still works. A whole cake cost less than 20 cents to make. Mothers called it crazy cake or war cake or depression cake, depending on where they lived and which hard time they remembered most. In a country where sugar was rationed to half a pound per person per week, a chocolate cake on the kitchen table was not a small thing. It was proof that even rationing could not take everything away. For families who had given up expecting treats, wacky cake was a quiet rebellion against the idea that being poor meant going without everything good. Your grandmother may have called it something different. The recipe was the same everywhere. That kind of defiance, baked at 350 degrees in a 9x13 pan, is the kind of thing a family does not forget. Number 7. Creamed chipped beef on toast, dried beef, flour, milk, poured over toast. Soldiers called it something unprintable, but they ate it 3 times a week in every branch of the military from World War I through Vietnam. The Army version appeared in the Manual of Army Cooks as far back as 1910. After the wars, veterans brought the recipe home and kept making it because it was cheap, it was fast, and it tasted like the only part of service they did not mind remembering. A jar of dried chipped beef cost about 25 cents in the 1940s. A loaf of bread cost 10 cents. For under 50 cents, you could feed a family of 4. In diners across the Midwest, creamed chipped beef on toast stayed on the menu through the 1970s. It was real food made by real people who knew what it meant to stretch a dollar until it screamed. Number 6. Rice pudding. Rice, milk, sugar. Your grandmother cooked it slow and stirred it often and waited until the rice absorbed the milk and turned creamy and thick. Some families added a pinch of cinnamon. Some stirred in a handful of raisins. The bones of the dish were always the same 3 things. In the 1930s, rice pudding was what you made when the pantry was almost bare, but you still wanted to give your family something that felt like a gift. A cup of rice cost a few cents. Milk was delivered to the door for about 8 cents a quart. The whole dessert cost less than a dime. Ruth Hendricks in Springfield, Missouri, made rice pudding every Sunday after church for 40 years. Her grandchildren said it tasted the same every single time. She said that was the point. Consistency was the only luxury she could afford. Number 5. Ketchup spaghetti. Spaghetti noodles. Ketchup. Butter. When there was no jar of tomato sauce in the pantry, there was almost always a bottle of ketchup. Mothers across America tossed cooked spaghetti with a few squirts of ketchup and a pat of butter and called it dinner. It sounds like a punchline now. But in the 1950s and 1960s, in homes where the grocery budget had run out before the end of the month, ketchup spaghetti was the meal that nobody talked about and everybody remembers. It cost almost nothing. A box of spaghetti was 10 cents. Ketchup was a nickel. You did not need a recipe. You just needed to not be proud. For children who grew up on it, ketchup spaghetti carries a strange double weight. It is the taste of not having enough, and also the taste of someone making sure you still got fed. Number 4. Peanut butter bread. Flour, sugar, and peanut butter. No yeast, no eggs, no butter. You mixed it together, poured it into a loaf pan, and baked it for about an hour. The result was a dense, slightly sweet bread that tasted like a peanut butter cookie in loaf form. During the Depression, peanut butter cost about 23 cents a jar, and a jar went a long way in this recipe. The bread did not rise much. It was heavy and filling, and a single loaf could last a family 3 or 4 days. In 2020, when grocery shelves went bare during the early months of the pandemic, peanut butter bread went viral on the internet. People rediscovered the same recipe their great-grandmothers had used 90 years earlier. The ingredients had not changed. Neither had the reason for making it. When the world gets uncertain, people go back to what works. What works is almost always simple. Number 3. Cabbage and noodles. Cabbage, egg noodles, butter or lard. In Polish and Hungarian neighborhoods across the industrial Midwest, this dish was called haluski, and it was the meal that kept immigrant families standing during the hardest years of the 20th century. You shredded the cabbage thin, cooked it down slow in butter or lard until it went soft and sweet, and tossed it with boiled egg noodles. That was the whole thing. A head of cabbage cost 5 cents in 1935. Noodles cost a dime. In steel towns like Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Youngstown, haluski showed up on kitchen tables 3 or 4 nights a week. It was not exotic, it was not even interesting to look at. It was warm, and it was filling, and it came from a tradition that stretched back hundreds of years in the old country. Those Polish grandmothers in Chicago and those Hungarian mothers in the Ohio River Valley were not following a trend. They were keeping their families alive with the same 3 ingredients their own mothers had used in villages they would never see again. Number 2. Spam and eggs. Spam, eggs, bread for toast. When Hormel introduced Spam in 1937, it cost about 25 cents a can. By the time World War II ended, over 150 million pounds of Spam had been shipped overseas to feed Allied soldiers. When those soldiers came home, they kept eating it. Not because they loved it, but because it was cheap, it kept without refrigeration, and you could slice it, fry it, and serve it with 2 eggs and a piece of toast for a complete meal. In Hawaii, Spam became a cultural staple. On the mainland, it was the quiet meal of working-class families who did not have enough for bacon or ham. A can of Spam and a dozen eggs could feed a family for 3 days. Nobody bragged about eating Spam and eggs. A lot of people survived on it. And survival is not something that needs to be glamorous. It just needs to work. Number 1, red beans and rice, dried red beans. Rice, a ham bone or a piece of smoked sausage. In New Orleans, Monday was wash day, and because doing laundry by hand took all afternoon, women put a pot of red beans on the stove in the morning and let it simmer until evening. The beans were cheap, the rice was cheaper. The ham bone left over from Sunday dinner gave the whole pot its flavor. A pound of dried red beans cost about 7 cents in the 1930s. A pound of rice cost 4 cents. For less than 15 cents, you could feed a family with leftovers for the next day. Louis Armstrong, who grew up poor in New Orleans, loved red beans and rice so much that he signed his letters "Red Beans and Ricely Yours." That was not a joke. That was a man who never forgot where he came from. Red beans and rice is not just a recipe. It is a record of what people did when they had almost nothing and still put something good on the table. Not one meal on this list required more than 3 ingredients. Not one cost more than a few cents. Make one of these this week. Pick the one that sounds the most familiar. Try the red beans and rice on a Monday. Try the potato soup on a cold night. Sit at the table. Do not eat standing at the counter. Do not eat in front of the screen. Sit down the way they used to. Now, I am not a doctor or a dietitian. This is not medical advice. This is just a look at how people used to eat when the budget left no room for waste. Pork chop rice skillet was the kind of meal that simmered away while seniors rested in their chairs, filling small apartments with the aroma of home cooking. A single bone-in pork chop, often purchased on sale for mere cents per pound, was browned in a well-seasoned skillet until golden. Rice was added directly to the pan along with water or broth, and the whole thing was covered and left to cook slowly until the rice absorbed every drop of porky flavor. The meat became fork tender, practically falling off the bone, while the rice turned creamy and rich from the rendered fat. Some added a can of cream of mushroom soup to make it even more substantial, while others kept it simple with just salt, pepper, and a bay leaf. The dish required almost no attention once assembled, making it perfect for those with limited energy or mobility. One pork chop and a cup of rice fed a senior for an entire day, proving that economy and satisfaction could share the same plate. Cream cheese and olive sandwiches were once the fancy tea lunch that quietly slipped onto regular kitchen tables when people needed something fast. You whipped cream cheese until fluffy, stirred in chopped green olives, and spread the whole mix onto rye or white bread. It sounds strange now, but back then, this salty, creamy combo was considered upscale, especially if you cut the crusts off. It showed up at luncheons, garden parties, and even school lunches when moms wanted to make something that looked like they tried. Old cookbooks listed it under easy entertaining, but most folks made it because it came together in 5 minutes and filled you up without cooking a thing. Some people swapped in pimento olives or added sliced cucumbers, but the classic version stayed simple, creamy, salty, and fast. It may not win over modern taste buds, but for families watching the clock and the grocery bill, these little sandwiches were a retro shortcut that stuck around when time was tight. Ranchero bean tostadas brought the lively spirit of a cantina to the weeknight table using only a few ingredients. Crisp corn tortillas toasted under the broiler formed a sturdy base for creamy refried beans straight from the can, warmed with a dash of cumin and a spoonful of diced tomatoes. A quick sprinkle of shredded cheddar melted under the heat, creating a golden crust that held everything together. Fresh salsa, sliced jalapenos, and a handful of chopped cilantro added color and brightness, turning a simple pantry meal into a vibrant feast. In less than 15 minutes, each tostada emerged hot and ready, inviting everyone to add their favorite toppings like sour cream or diced avocado. The crunchy base and savory beans offered a satisfying contrast that pleased both children and adults, proving that meatless dinners can still feel indulgent and filling. Every bite carried smoky spice and fresh garden flavor, perfect for nights when time was short, but a craving for bold taste remained strong, making this dish a regular star in kitchens that celebrated speed and flavor in equal measure. Peanut butter and sweet pickle sandwiches were one of those strange combinations that somehow became a regular part of vintage kitchen routines. You spread creamy peanut butter on soft sandwich bread, added sliced sweet pickles, and pressed it together. That was it. Quick, crunchy, and a little tangy with just enough sweetness to balance it out. It sounds odd now, but back then it was a favorite for busy lunches, quick after-school snacks, or when there was not much else in the pantry. The peanut butter gave it richness, the pickles added bite, and together they made a sandwich that stuck to your ribs and kept you going. You would find this one scribbled in old recipe boxes passed around at church picnics or quietly tucked into Grandma's cookbook among the other quirky 10-minute meals. Families leaned on this recipe because it came together fast, filled you up, and used ingredients most people always had on hand. It might be forgotten now, but for plenty of households back then, peanut butter and sweet pickle sandwiches were a surprising lifesaver when time and money were both running short. Tomato gravy over rice was Southern poverty food that generations of seniors relied upon when the pantry was nearly bare, but dinner still needed to happen. The gravy started with bacon drippings heated in a skillet, then flour was stirred in to create a roux that cooked until golden. Canned tomatoes were added along with water to create a gravy that was tangy, rich, and deeply comforting. Sugar balanced the acidity while salt and pepper brought everything into focus. Poured over a mound of white rice, this simple combination became a meal that satisfied hunger without straining the budget. A single can of tomatoes and a cup of rice fed one person for 2 days, making it one of the most economical dinners possible. The dish carried memories of harder times, of grandmothers who knew how to make something from nothing. For seniors eating alone, tomato gravy over rice was both nostalgia and nourishment in a single skillet, proof that comfort could be measured in the simplest ingredients prepared with care. Quick bologna slaw sandwiches were the shortcut lunch that turned cheap deli meat and leftover dressing into something filling in almost no time. You chopped up slices of bologna, mixed them with coleslaw dressing, usually that creamy, tangy kind, and spooned the whole mixture onto soft sandwich buns. That was lunch, ready in under 10 minutes and surprisingly satisfying. This quirky little meal showed up all over Southern quick lunch cookbooks and school cafeteria menus because it was fast, affordable, and made the most of what you had on hand. Bologna was the lunch meat that never seemed to run out, and coleslaw dressing lived in the fridge way longer than you expected. Some folks added shredded cabbage or onions to stretch it further, but most kept it simple with just bologna, creamy dressing, and a soft bun. It might not sound gourmet, but when the clock was ticking and grocery money was tight, these salty, creamy sandwiches were a lifesaver. You would find the recipe scribbled on old index cards, passed around at potlucks, or tucked inside faded community cookbooks that promised quick meals when time and energy were both running low. Pimento cheese on saltines was a Southern staple that turned a few pantry ingredients into a quick, satisfying snack when groceries were running thin. You mixed up pimento cheese, usually some shredded cheddar, mayonnaise, chopped pimentos, and spread it over saltine crackers. That was it. 10 minutes or less, and you had something creamy, salty, and packed with flavor to hold you over until dinner. It might sound simple now, but back then, this little recipe kept homes running when budgets were stretched and time was short. The saltines gave it crunch, the pimento cheese added richness, and together they made a snack that showed up at school lunches, church picnics, or as a quick fix on busy afternoons. You would find this recipe scribbled onto old note cards, tucked in faded cookbooks, or passed down through generations of families who knew how to make the most of what they had. It might be forgotten today, but for plenty of folks back then, pimento cheese on saltines was a fast, filling favorite that saved the day more than once. Chicken fried rice with canned chicken delivered a satisfying stir-fry that used pantry staples to create takeout flavor in record time. Day-old rice separated beautifully in a hot skillet coated with a thin film of oil, each grain absorbing the smoky heat. Diced onions, carrots, and peas added color and sweetness, sizzling as they released their fragrance. A can of cooked chicken provided tender meat with no extra prep, breaking apart into savory shreds that mingled with the vegetables. A quick splash of soy sauce and a sprinkle of garlic powder tied everything together, while scrambled eggs folded in at the end brought richness and body. The result was a meal that tasted carefully crafted yet came together in less than 15 minutes, perfect for evenings when energy ran low but appetites ran high. Families loved how it stretched a small amount of protein across several generous portions while clearing the fridge of leftover rice. Each spoonful offered the comfort of home and the excitement of a restaurant favorite, a reminder that great flavor does not require a long list of fresh ingredients when skill and heat meet simple planning. Bean and bacon simmer was the kind of slow-cooked meal that filled small homes with warmth and the promise of something good waiting on the stove. Dried beans cost pennies per pound and provided protein that rivaled meat at a fraction of the price. Seniors would sort through the beans each morning, cover them with water, and let them soak while going about their day. By evening, the beans were ready to simmer with a few strips of bacon, diced onion, and enough water to cover everything by an inch. Hours of gentle cooking transformed the hard beans into creamy, tender morsels while the bacon infused the liquid with smoky richness. A single pound of dried beans created enough food to last nearly a week when portioned carefully. The cooking liquid itself became a treasure, thick with flavor and nutrients that could be sipped like broth or used to moisten cornbread. This wasn't a meal that happened quickly, but for seniors with time and little money, bean and bacon simmer provided security in every spoonful. Italian sausage hoagies brought the flavor of a street fair to the dinner table with little more than a skillet and a few minutes. Pre-cooked Italian sausage links browned quickly until their casings crackled and juices sizzled across the pan. Sliced onions and bell peppers joined the heat, softening and caramelizing as they soaked up the seasoned drippings. Hoagie rolls warmed in the oven until lightly crisp on the outside and tender within. When the vegetables turned golden, the sausages nestled into the rolls, draped with the sweet pepper and onion mixture, and a light scatter of shredded provolone if desired. Each bite balanced smoky spice, soft bread, and the gentle sweetness of slow-cooked vegetables. The meal felt festive, yet required almost no effort, making it a favorite for families who wanted bold taste without a long cooking session. Served with a simple green salad or a handful of chips, these hoagies brought the spirit of an Italian street vendor into a busy kitchen, showing that fast food can still be deeply satisfying and full of character when prepared with care and served piping hot. Canned chili over saltines was the kind of quick meal that got dinner on the table fast with hardly any effort, especially when the cupboards were running bare. You opened a can of chili, heated it on the stove, and spooned it over a pile of saltine crackers. That was all there was to it. It might sound plain now, but back when budgets were tight and groceries were stretched thin, this quick, salty, filling meal showed up on plenty of kitchen tables. The saltines soaked up the chili, adding crunch and making a small amount of food go a whole lot farther. Some folks dressed it up with shredded cheese or onions if they had them, but most kept it simple and practical. You would find this recipe clipped from old magazines, scribbled in community cookbooks, or passed along by word of mouth from one busy family to the next. It was never about being fancy. It was about keeping everyone full with what little you had. Today, it is one of those forgotten meals, but for plenty of homes back then, canned chili over saltines made dinner happen fast. Egg and ketchup stir-fry over rice was the no-fuss pantry lunch that every family had in their back pocket when groceries were running low but bellies still needed filling. You cracked a couple of eggs into a pan, scrambled them up with a little oil, added a squirt of ketchup, and poured the whole thing over leftover rice. That was it. Done in under 10 minutes, salty, tangy, and surprisingly satisfying for something so simple. Kids loved it because it tasted like breakfast and lunch at the same time, with just enough of that sweet ketchup kick to keep things interesting. Parents leaned on it because it used what they already had in the kitchen. Eggs, rice, and ketchup were always hanging around. Some families added soy sauce, scallions, or even a slice of processed cheese to stretch it further, but most kept it basic and fast. You could find this recipe scribbled in lunch guides, tucked inside old homemaker cookbooks, or passed along by neighbors who knew how to stretch leftovers into a real meal. It was not fancy, but it filled you up when time and money were tight. Fried cabbage and sausage was a one-pan wonder that stretched a single link of smoked sausage into a meal that fed body and soul alike. Cabbage cost almost nothing and kept for weeks in the refrigerator, making it a staple for seniors watching their budgets. The sausage was sliced into coins and browned until the fat rendered out. Then shredded cabbage was added and cooked until wilted and slightly caramelized. The cabbage absorbed the smoky, porky flavor from the drippings, transforming from a humble vegetable into something deeply satisfying. A splash of vinegar or a sprinkle of caraway seeds added complexity without adding cost. The dish came together in under 20 minutes and required nothing more than a cutting board and a skillet. One small head of cabbage and one sausage link created enough food for 3 meals, making it extraordinarily economical. The sweetness of the cooked cabbage balanced the salty richness of the sausage perfectly, proving that poverty cooking could produce genuinely delicious results. Texas chili dog plate made a hearty, messy dinner that satisfied every craving after a long workday. Hot dogs sizzled in a skillet while a can of chili warmed on the stove with a spoonful of cumin and smoked paprika to deepen the flavor. Soft buns were split and toasted lightly, ready to hold the hot dogs as soon as they browned. The steaming chili was spooned generously over each dog, followed by shredded cheddar and a scatter of diced onions for bite. The smell of spice and smoke filled the kitchen, drawing everyone to the table before the last dog was dressed. Each plate was a cheerful mess, requiring extra napkins and rewarding every bite with a mix of textures and flavors. It was inexpensive, quick and filling, perfect for nights when there was little time but big appetites. The combination of tender bun, juicy sausage, and rich chili sauce made this simple dish a lasting favorite in households that valued both speed and flavor. Cold spaghetti with Italian dressing was one of those forgotten leftover tricks that stretched a single meal into something new without much time or money spent. You would take last night's spaghetti, rinse it off if needed, toss it in a splash of bottled Italian dressing, and that was dinner or lunch, ready in under 10 minutes. It sounds plain, but back then, this was an easy, thrifty way to keep food from going to waste and keep everyone fed. Families leaned on recipes like this when grocery lists ran short and leftovers became the next meal. The dressing added tang, the pasta filled you up, and it all came together cold, quick, and satisfying. You would find cold spaghetti with Italian dressing scribbled in community cookbooks, passed along at potlucks, or quietly traded between neighbors looking for affordable meal ideas. Some folks tossed in vegetables or cheese if they had any left, but most kept it simple and practical. It might feel forgotten now, but back then this cold pasta salad was a staple for families trying to stretch their meals, save their money, and still have something satisfying on the table without turning on the stove. Cabbage and hot dog stir-fry was the skillet lunch that popped up in every budget cookbook from the 1970s, and it stuck around because it worked. You chopped cabbage, sliced up hot dogs, threw them in a hot pan with a little oil, and stir-fried the whole thing until crispy and tender. It was salty, smoky, crunchy, and came together in under 10 minutes. This recipe lived in frugal households, school cafeterias, and quick lunch guides because it used the cheapest ingredients possible and still filled you up. Cabbage was a go-to vegetable for stretching meals, and hot dogs were always around because they lasted forever in the fridge. Toss them together, add a little pepper or hot sauce, and lunch was ready fast. Some folks added onions or garlic, but most kept it simple, just cabbage and hot dogs sizzling in the pan. It was not fancy, but it was reliable, warm, and made sure nothing went to waste when groceries were tight. Corned beef hash from a can became an unlikely hero for seniors who needed hot, filling meals without the fuss of extensive preparation. The rectangular cans lined grocery store shelves at budget-friendly prices, containing a mixture of corned beef and potatoes that transformed when properly cooked. The secret was patience, spreading the hash in a hot, greased skillet and leaving it alone until a dark, crispy crust formed on the bottom. That crust was the prize, shattering against the teeth before giving way to the soft, savory interior. A fried egg placed on top turned it into a complete meal, the runny yolk creating an instant sauce that coated every bite. Seniors living alone appreciated that a single can provided 2 generous servings, each one satisfying enough to carry them through to the next meal. The dish required only a skillet and a few minutes of attention, making it perfect for those days when cooking felt like too much effort. Corned beef hash proved that convenience and comfort could coexist beautifully. Steak tips with garlic butter turned small pieces of beef into a dinner that tasted far more luxurious than the clock allowed. Bite-sized cubes of steak were seasoned with salt and pepper, then seared quickly in a smoking hot skillet until browned on the outside and just tender within. As the meat rested for a moment, butter melted in the pan with minced garlic and a handful of fresh parsley, creating a sauce that smelled like a steakhouse. The sizzling butter was poured back over the meat, coating every piece in rich, garlicky flavor. Served over toast, rice, or even plain with a side of vegetables, the dish offered restaurant-style indulgence in the time it took to set the table. Families loved how a modest amount of beef could feel like a feast, and the sound of butter hitting the hot pan became a signal that the day's work was over and something delicious was ready. Quick macaroni and stewed tomatoes was one of those meals that showed up when there was not much left in the pantry, but families still needed dinner on the table fast. You boiled some elbow macaroni, opened a can of stewed tomatoes, and stirred it all together with salt, pepper, and a little butter if you could spare it. That was it. It sounds humble, but back when budgets were tight and grocery trips were rare, this simple stovetop meal came through. The pasta filled you up, the tomatoes added flavor, and it all came together in under 10 minutes. You would find recipes like this scribbled in old cookbooks, passed down from one generation to the next, or clipped from women's magazines that promised fast, filling meals on a shoestring budget. It might seem plain now, but quick macaroni and stewed tomatoes helped plenty of families stretch their groceries and make dinner happen, even on the hardest days. Cracker Stack lunches were the shortcut every lunchbox kid quietly loved, and every parent threw together when time was short. You took Ritz crackers, layered slices of American cheese between them, and tossed in some apple slices on the side. It was simple, salty, and filled you up without needing to cook a thing. Old lunchbox guides always had this one listed because it hit that sweet spot between easy, affordable, and kid-friendly. Some folks swapped in peanut butter or ham, but the classic cheese and cracker combo stuck around the longest. It was not gourmet, but it got the job done. Quick, portable, and ready before the bus pulled up. It sounds basic now, but for families juggling busy mornings and tight grocery budgets, Cracker Stacks were a reliable lunch that needed zero effort to pull off. Salmon Patty Skillet was a thrifty creation that turned an inexpensive can of pink salmon into golden, crispy cakes that satisfied like nothing else. Seniors on fixed incomes knew that canned salmon provided protein, calcium from the soft bones, and nutrients that doctors would later praise as essential. The salmon was drained, flaked, and mixed with crushed crackers, a beaten egg, and minced onion before being shaped into patties and fried until the exterior turned deeply golden. The inside stayed moist and tender, with a flavor both familiar and comforting. These patties were often served right in the skillet alongside fried potatoes or with a simple white sauce poured over top. A single can yielded 3 or 4 patties, enough for 2 dinners with careful portioning. The recipe required no special ingredients and came together in minutes, making it ideal for evenings when energy was low. Salmon patties represented the ingenuity of making something genuinely delicious from pantry staples. Ham and cheese biscuit sandwiches turned leftovers into a satisfying handheld meal that tasted like a weekend treat even on the busiest night. Flaky biscuits baked from a can or quickly mixed from scratch rose high in the oven while slices of baked ham warmed in a skillet. As soon as the biscuits were golden, they were split open and layered with the savory ham and slices of sharp cheddar or mild American cheese. A few minutes back in the warm oven melted the cheese into a gooey blanket that glued everything together. The salty ham, buttery biscuit, and rich cheese made a perfect combination that required no side dish and no long wait. For families coming home late, this sandwich was both supper and comfort, a way to turn yesterday's roast into tonight's fast feast. Children grabbed them hot from the tray, and the memory of that warm bite remains an echo of efficiency and home-style pleasure. Mashed banana and mayo sandwiches might sound strange to modern ears, but back in the day, this sweet and tangy sandwich was a Southern staple that showed up in plenty of lunchboxes. You mashed up a ripe banana, spread it on soft sandwich bread, and added a swipe of mayonnaise. That was it. It was quick, cheap, and surprisingly filling. Families leaned on recipes like this when groceries were scarce and meals had to stretch. The banana added sweetness, the mayo gave it creaminess, and together they turned plain bread into a fast, satisfying lunch. You would find this sandwich scribbled in old community cookbooks, passed down at church picnics, or tucked into handwritten recipe boxes that lived in kitchen drawers. It might be forgotten now, but for plenty of folks growing up during hard times, this odd little sandwich was a reliable 10-minute fix when money was tight and hunger was knocking. Rice and egg bowls with soy sauce were the thrift store cookbook lunch that turned leftovers into something hot, salty, and satisfying in minutes. You grabbed leftover rice, tossed it in a pan, cracked in an egg, scrambled everything together, and finished with a dash of soy sauce. It was quick, filling, and one of the smartest ways to stretch pantry basics into lunch. Old, thrifty meal guides loved this recipe because it used stuff already sitting in your fridge and came together in under 10 minutes. Some folks added chopped scallions or a little sesame oil, but the classic stayed simple: rice, egg, and soy sauce, fried up fast. It was a go-to for busy parents, college students, or anyone making do with leftovers and a tight grocery budget. The rice got crispy around the edges, the egg brought protein, and the soy sauce pulled it all together. It might not win awards for presentation, but it filled you up and tasted good when you needed a cheap, fast lunch. Chicken fricassee was old-fashioned comfort that transformed tough, inexpensive chicken parts into tender, gravy-smothered perfection. Before boneless breasts dominated supermarket cases, seniors bought leg quarters for pennies and knew how to coax flavor from every piece. The chicken was dredged in seasoned flour and browned slowly in a deep skillet, building a fond on the bottom that would become rich gravy. Onions and celery joined the pan before liquid was added, and the whole pot simmered until the meat fell from the bones. The gravy thickened naturally from the flour coating, creating a velvety sauce that begged to be soaked up with bread or rice. One chicken leg quarter could feed a senior for 2 meals, when stretched with plenty of gravy over something starchy. The dish was forgiving, patient, and deeply satisfying, the kind of cooking that required time but rewarded it generously with flavor and nourishment that modern convenience foods simply cannot match. Skillet hot dogs with onions and peppers brought the flavor of a street cart into the kitchen without the need for a grill. Hot dogs were scored and browned in a cast-iron pan, while sliced onions and bell peppers sautéed beside them in a little butter and salt. The vegetables softened and caramelized, releasing a sweetness that mingled with the smoky scent of the searing meat. Split rolls were toasted directly in the same pan to catch every bit of flavor. In less than 10 minutes, the hot dogs were nestled into the warm bread and piled high with the pepper and onion mixture, a quick dinner that felt indulgent and hearty. Families loved the one-pan cleanup and the way the dish fed a group with minimal effort. Each bite carried the taste of summer fairs and city sidewalks, proving that even a humble hot dog can become a meal worth remembering when time is short and hunger is strong. Jelly roll-ups on white bread were a quick, sweet little snack that kept plenty of kids going when there was not much else to pack in their lunchbox. You took a slice of sandwich bread, rolled it flat with a rolling pin or a glass, spread on jelly, and rolled it up tight. That was all there was to it. It sounds simple now, but back then, this was the kind of treat that showed up when families had to stretch every dollar. It was fast, easy, and made use of pantry staples that were always on hand. You would find these roll-ups tucked into school lunches, brought to church picnics, or passed around as after-school snacks when groceries were running low. The jelly added sweetness, the bread kept it filling, and it all came together in just a few minutes. It might be forgotten today, but for plenty of families, these jelly roll-ups were a quick fix that kept kids happy and parents sane. Zucchini fritters from leftovers were the garden surplus lunch that turned backyard vegetables into something hot, crispy, and filling when you had more zucchini than you knew what to do with. You grated up those extra zucchinis, mixed them with flour, eggs, and a little seasoning, then pan-fried them until golden brown. It was quick, cheap, and showed up in nearly every Use Your Garden Haul cookbook from the 1970s. Backyard gardens always seemed to over-deliver on zucchini, and fritters were a fast, satisfying way to keep all that produce from going to waste. They crisped up around the edges, stayed soft in the center, and felt just hearty enough to pass for lunch. Some families added shredded cheese, herbs, or breadcrumbs to stretch them further, but most kept it simple with just the basics. It was frugal, filling, and practical, a classic example of how families made the most of what they grew. It might not have been exciting, but zucchini fritters worked hard to keep plates full and grocery spending low. Hamburger hash was the weeknight miracle that turned a quarter-pound of ground beef into a complete dinner for pennies. During the lean decades of the mid-20th century, seniors living alone discovered that browning ground beef with diced potatoes and onions created something far greater than the sum of its parts. The meat released its fat into the skillet, crisping the potatoes while the onions caramelized into sweet strands that wove through every bite. A splash of Worcestershire sauce and black pepper transformed the humble mixture into something deeply savory. The beauty of hamburger hash was its forgiving nature. It accepted leftover peas, corn, or green beans without complaint, stretching the meal further. One skillet fed one person for 2 meals, making it economical for those watching every dime. The crispy bottom that formed against the cast iron became the most coveted part, scraped up and savored last. This wasn't fancy cooking, but it was honest food that kept countless seniors fed and satisfied. Egg and potato hash turned scraps into a filling supper that could be on the table before the day's stories were finished. Leftover boiled potatoes were diced and tossed into a hot skillet with a bit of butter until their edges crisped to a golden brown. Eggs were cracked directly over the sizzling potatoes, their yolks breaking to coat each bite in a rich sauce as they cooked. A sprinkle of salt, pepper, and maybe a dash of paprika was all it needed. The aroma of frying potatoes and eggs promised satisfaction and thrift, a meal built from yesterday's extras and today's needs. Served straight from the pan, the hash invited everyone to eat family style, forks clinking as the steam rose. It proved that speed never had to sacrifice comfort and that the best dinners often came from making the most of what was already on hand. Grape jelly meatball skillet might sound like a strange mix now, but back then, it was one of those quirky, sweet, and savory meals that showed up fast and stretched what little meat you had. You browned some mini meatballs in a skillet, poured in grape jelly and a splash of mustard, and let it all bubble together. In 10 minutes flat, dinner was ready. It was sweet, tangy, salty, and surprisingly filling. Families leaned on recipes like this because they turned a small amount of ground beef into a meal that felt bigger than it was. You could find this in old church cookbooks, clipped from women's magazines, or scribbled onto recipe cards tucked in drawers. It was not about fancy ingredients. It was about getting something warm, satisfying, and a little fun onto the table, fast. Today it feels forgotten, but back then, this sweet skillet meal kept homes running during the toughest weeks. Jellied chicken salad cups were the quirky, retro lunch you probably saw at your grandmother's house or flipped past in old homemaker guides. You made chicken salad, shredded chicken, mayo, celery, a little seasoning, and then set the whole thing in gelatin until it firmed up. It sounds strange now, but back then, this was peak luncheon presentation. You scooped the wobbly salad into lettuce leaves, added a sprig of parsley or a cherry tomato, and served it cold. It was light, chilled, and looked fancier than the ingredients actually were. These showed up at potlucks, garden parties, and quick family lunches when the oven stayed off and time was short. Gelatin molds made everything feel more polished, even when it came straight from leftovers and pantry basics. Old cookbooks loved recipes like this because they stretched food, required no cooking, and made lunch look impressive with barely any effort. It might feel out of place today, but jellied chicken salad cups were fast, filling, and weirdly fun when they first hit the table. These meals were not designed to be healthy. They were designed to keep people alive. And they did. Leave a comment and tell me which one of these your family made. Tell me if your grandmother signed her letters the way Louis Armstrong did. Tell me if your mother fried the bologna thick or thin. These are not just recipes. They are proof that the simplest food, made with 3 ingredients or fewer, can still be an act of love.